What's up everyone, it's Dakota and welcome back to another Pioneer video. And this week we're going to be taking a look at a deck in the Pioneer format that's kind of taken the shape of a former Modern deck that used to see a ton of play in the format and it's kind of dropped off thanks to a little card called Fury. This deck does look really sweet and I'm actually really pumped to talk about it because it kind of looks like an archetype that I would enjoy that has some combo elements while at its core really being an aggressive deck and kind of taking after probably one of my favorite like mechanics or archetypes or things to do in Magic, and that's just getting to tutor out other cards and kind of combo in a way into other things. So, without further ado, and all that said, and all that fun, happy stuff, let's go look at the four color humans for the Pioneer format and just kind of see how this deck has taken shape and kind of the inspiration that's taken from its modern older brother, parent, cousin. Not really sure. But with all that being said, let's go ahead and take a look at the deck. So here we have four color humans, piloted by Paul Lagher 13. I'm pretty sure that's how it's said. If not, don't really care because most of these moto names are like impossible to pronounce. But before we get too deep into the deck and check out four color humans, make sure that if you're not already subscribed to the channel, that you do consider subscribing and ring the notification bell. So that way you support my content and keeps me making content kind of like this, going over different decks in the Pioneer and the Modern format, getting some gameplay and other discussion type videos involved each week. On top of that, there is a link in the description to join the Discord server. Feel free to copy the link, follow it, and join the server. Talk about Modern, Pioneer, and really all Magic formats, and even some non-Magic related things. I know I'm a big video gamer, and I want to try getting back into streaming and mixing some of that into the content too as well. So be on the lookout for that. With that said, that's enough shilling. Let's go ahead and look at four color humans. The reason why most of the people would end up being here. Uh, this deck in particular was taken to an 11th place finish in the Pioneer Challenge this past weekend. A 5-2 record in the Swiss. Obviously, not good enough to make top 8, but still very good. I think 5-2 or maybe 5-1-1 would be like tiebreakers and stuff. So either way, like a really good placing and a really good showing for this deck that could potentially have some legs. At its core, it is a creature deck that is a human tribal deck. Uh, Plays into two ways because you have some very good humans in the format, like Reflector Mage, that can give you a lot of tempo, bouncing a creature to your opponent's hand, and then they cannot cast creature spells with the same name as that creature until your next turn. Cards like Extraction Specialist has shown up in other deck lists and stuff, just being another good card to get some creatures with mana value 2 or less from your graveyard. While they can't attack or block as long as you control Extraction Specialist, obviously we know that there is a lot of creatures that gain some special bonuses and things like that just from being in play. We have cards like Thalia's Lieutenant that can put +1/+1 counters on all your humans. You have Charming Prince who could actually exile your Extraction Specialist and then bring it back to then bring back another creature. Obviously, also having the other two modes placed on it, but that one. Just off the top of my head, being a mode that you could choose to allow your Charming Prince to attack and maybe even get back a Thalia's Lieutenant and just put counters on all of your guys. Dauntless Bodyguard being able to come back and giving just another creature indestructible, and obviously not super important for it to attack if gotten back with like Extraction Specialist because it offers you that protection to maybe one of your more valuable creatures. We also have like one Blade Historian, which I'm assuming is in this deck because you could just sacrifice like a Reflector Mage, an Extraction Specialist, which would unlock one of your other creatures that you got back with it. And getting it and giving your creatures double strike, your attacking creatures double strike, which makes combat very hard for your opponent, especially when you are kind of like stacking up counters and stuff on cards like Experiment 1 and Charming Thalia's Lieutenant. So the engine that kind of gets us all together is kind of something that we've seen from most of these like humans decks and things like that is a card called Collected Company. For those of you who are not familiar with Collected Company, you basically look at the top 6 cards of your library. You put 2 creature cards with convert mana cost 3 or less from among them onto the battlefield. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. This card has been a staple of a lot of strategies since it was in standard way back when we had like Bant Collected Company, and that was one of the best decks to play in the format. We've had various Collected Company decks in Modern and even some in Pioneer, and this deck being probably the sweetest Collected Company deck that I've seen in a minute, so definitely getting to play this card is really sweet. And we have another card that kind of bonds two different archetypes together. For those that may be familiar with a card called Birthing Pod, Birthing Pod would allow you to sacrifice a creature, and then you got a creature with converted mana cost equal to the mana cost of the sacrificed creature plus one. Pyre of Heroes does essentially the same thing. You pay 2, tap it. You'll sacrifice a creature, and then you search your library for a creature card that shares a creature type with the sacrificed creature that has a converted mana cost equal to plus one plus that creature's converted mana cost. You put it on the battlefield, and you can only activate this ability as a sorcery. Pyre of Heroes plays exactly like Birthing Pod does, and this 4-color humans deck plays kind of how those Birthing Pod decks do back in the day. So instead of having a combo where you maybe gain infinite life or where you just get to deal infinite damage, Pyre of Heroes just gives you this value engine where you can sacrifice any one of these like 2 mana things, you know, your Wolf Pack Leader, your Thalia's Lieutenant, Charming Princes, whatever, or even going as far as like your Bodyguards, Experiment Ones, and Kithian, and upgrade to like Extraction Specialist being like a really good one where like you sacrifice a Thalia's Lieutenant after getting to stack counters on some things, go into Extraction Specialist, get back Thalia's Lieutenant to then put counters on your things again. And then even being able to get rid of like the Extraction Specialist to go into like Blade Historian being like your top end. Um, this card just gives you a ton of options and just able to upgrade into better creatures. Your experiment ones just get to help you be like super aggressive, but getting to sacrifice the creature, which of note, if anyone is curious, it may come up. You can now remove 2 counters from this after sacrificing it to Pyre of Heroes to regenerate it. That's not how that works. But like just getting to go into bigger and better creatures, like getting to turn Experiment 1 into a Werewolf pack leader, to then eventually turn maybe another 2 mana human into like an Aether Channeler or like another Extraction Specialist to get back the thing, to then quickly enable your Werewolf pack leader. There's just a lot of inherent synergies that you get from just even like using Pyre of Heroes to upgrade your creatures and things like that. Um, so far, yeah, like the deck is super sweet. You have a lot of these lands that don't really give you too much room for like utility. We've seen decks play like Otawara, Boseiju, you know, the channel lands and things like that. This deck, no room for it. As you can see, 4-color humans really just looks like bang humans with like using red to be able to cast like Blade Historian, and you have some black cards on the sideboard, I guess. But you have like Bark Channel Pathway, Botanical Sanctums, you have Branch Loft Pathway, which is the green-white one, uh, Bright Climb, and a Grim Climb Pathway, which is the white and black one. Mana Confluence, as always, just being one of the best ways to add any color mana to your mana pool, just at the cost of 1 life. Hopefully, with you being the beatdown deck, your life can be used as a resource to kind of leverage the color fixing that Mana Confluence gives you. And of course, you have Temple Garden, Unclaimed Territory being a way to cast your creatures for any color of mana. And Secluded Courtyard, you can do the same thing where you choose a creature type and you can activate the ability and cast creature spells of the chosen type. So definitely some good fixing. You have 11 lands total that tap for any color of mana, and a few other cards that a lot of other ones really that in the early turns of the game, in the case of the pathways, at any point in the game, give you untapped mana that will be for the most part painless. Sideboard, boy, you have a plethora of options here. Deafening Silence for really probably the like Phoenix decks come to mind, and the Lotus Field combo decks, just to kind of stop them and force them to have to interact with Deafening Silence. Now, while this card is definitely not the end all be all, because we believe that there is still a video on my channel of me beating a Deafening Silence and like another hate piece with the combo deck, but I think this deck is able to leverage Deafening Silence very well because it's able to play it on turn 1 and then just start playing a bunch of creatures and hopefully snowball to the point where you put your opponent on having to have the answer plus very specific cards to go off in the face of a Deafening Silence. You have cards like Acquisitions Expert, which are basically like you get to look at so many cards from your opponent's hand, and then you get to choose one of those cards and discard it. Of course, having humans with the creature type human plus something adds to the party, which increases the number of cards that your opponent reveals. Another card that you could just Pyre heroes into and kind of disrupt the combo decks as well. Outland Liberator being another like tutor piece for the more artifact based decks. Of course, you worry about cards like Grafdigger's Cage because then you can't hit cards from Collected Company and get creatures from Pyre of Heroes. So Outland Liberator just being a answer in the main deck for cards like that. Also, just being able to flip over into an aggressive, a bear on one side and then get to be bigger on the other. Dahlia, Guardian of the Thraben, again, just kind of mess with those like non-creature based decks. Unlicensed Hearst, always just being the card that people go to play as their graveyard disruption in the format. Very powerful, very good, and also just becomes really huge. And a lot of the time, even like your 1 mana creatures in this deck, and just about any creature in your deck, can crew this thing up and deal massive damage. Fiendslayer Paladin getting can be the target of red or black spells your opponent controls. Definitely coming in for those red black mid range mirrors in the red black mid range like matchups and things like that. Deck and Stone is just efficient removal, getting rid of like a ton of creatures, if possible. If not, just being a removal spell for one, and kind of being like another card that was printed recently in Standard that I can never remember the name of. You have cards like General Kudro of Dranith, which is basically a lord for humans, and then when it or another human enters the battlefield, you get to exile a card from your opponent's graveyard, and then you can even like use him as removal as well, but kind of using him more for the exiling of cards in the graveyards, and the lord effect is a kind of a nice bonus. Campbell, another way to punish like the decks that are just trying to go off by casting a ton of spells, i.e., the even like I guess control decks and stuff like that. But I don't think you necessarily want Campbell for that. But again, like the Phoenix decks and the Lotus Field decks are definitely the ones that come to mind. Nightclubber. I've actually never seen this card before. Enters battlefield, creatures your opponent control get -1/-1 until end of turn. This could just be a really good way of just pushing a ton of damage at one time and really making your opponent like trade their board or even just killing some of their smaller creatures with a card like this. Very good. And of course, if you blitz it, you just get to draw a card afterwards, which is pretty nice. Uh, Redain, God of the Worthy, another card that kind of taxes your opponent's mana if they're trying to play some kind of combo deck, or even if they're playing like the Phoenix deck, making their spells just cost even more. And Snowlands, your opponent's control enter the battlefield tap. That's so weird. Mainly just used for the one side, and then the Protector Shield can do some work as well. Sin Collector being an oldie but a goodie, but a card that, again, lets you look at your opponent's hand, take an instant sorcery card from it, generate some value. Of course, has like 2 power, so it can be pretty aggressive, especially again, like using Pyre of Humans to kind of like tutor these guys out. Urtai Resurrected is another card, a new card from the Dominaria United set. When it enters the battlefield, you choose one. It has flash. You counter target spell, activated ability, or triggered ability, and then its controller draws a card. You can destroy another target creature or planeswalker, and draw. Its controller draws a card. Again, another creature that you can tutor into, being a one of. But if you draw it, it's not necessarily the worst thing because it has an aggressive stats. I would say, especially in the interact at instant speed, your opponent might be expecting Collected Company and play something that would kind of play around Collected Company, and they can run right into Urtai Resurrected. So definitely something to keep in mind when you're playing like this card and deciding to bring it in, maybe against like some other like control type decks and things like that. And that is the long-winded explanation and kind of fumbling through the four-color humans deck. Decks like this are super hard for me to evaluate because a lot of the times, like they just have a lot of tools for a bunch of different matchups. Obviously, in the main deck, I feel like this deck can be super aggressive, but then can also just be this super value engine that kind of makes your opponent's life miserable. And even if they clear the board once or twice, you're like a Collected Company away. Even like Pyre of Heroes, if you just find like another creature to just slowly climb up the chain, your opponent not having an answer for one thing after another, like even if you play a Dauntless Bodyguard, you have a Pyre of Heroes in play, just getting to upgrade this into one of these three creatures, and then eventually go into like Extraction Specialist to get back one of these other creatures that you sacrificed. Even like I said, the combo that we talked about earlier with Extraction Specialist getting back Charming Prince to then exile the Extraction Specialist to then bring it back to bring back something else to allow the Charming Prince to get into the red zone. Of course, Extraction Specialist can get the red zone as well, but bring back like a Thalia's Lieutenant, and you've added 7 power to the board, 8 power total across 3 bodies, and of course, getting to sacrifice the Thalia's Lieutenant again to get another Extraction Specialist to get back the Thalia's Lieutenant. There's just so many paths that decks like this can take. It's awesome to see. This might be a deck that I try out playing as well because it looks like it's a lot of fun. And like I said, it has like the side of being super aggressive where you can just curve out 1 mana thing, 2 mana thing, 3 mana thing, 4 mana thing, and then just really put your opponent under the gun while also just being resilient with the kind of Pyre of Heroes like package of how it gets to tutor for things and also just getting to add a ton of value with Collected Company. So if this is a deck that you would enjoy playing and I guess want to see more of it, leave a like on this video, leave a comment, even just to kind of increase the traffic to the video, and we will consider playing this on stream or in a separate series of videos. I think that would be a lot of fun. Of course, if you enjoy the content that I'm putting out, please consider subscribing to the channel and ring the notification bell so that I know that you're supporting my content. And of course, keep making me make these videos. So very close to reaching 100 subscribers by the end of the year, which would be amazing if we did it. And I think we're just going to absolutely blow it out of the water. I think by the end of the year, we could possibly, on the high end, I think hit 150. So that would be really cool to achieve that. So if you want to help me achieve that goal and help a small content creator out, please consider doing that. I hope you all enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you all in the next one.